The billionaire CEO was about to sign the most important contract of his life when a child's voice echoed through the room. "Sir, that paper is wrong." Everyone froze. The words didn't belong here, not in a place where power wore tailored suits and silence was the language of respect. They came from a small voice near the corner, hesitant but clear, trembling yet unshakable. A voice no one had noticed until now. For a second, the entire conference room held its breath. Before anything else, if this video finds you well, wherever you are, tell me how it made you feel. Because what happened in that moment would remind everyone in that room that truth doesn't always wear a tie. Please click the subscribe button. Let us begin. At exactly 9:47 a.m., the massive mahogany doors of the executive suite had swung open. Arnold Pierce, founder and CEO of Pierce Industries, stepped in with the poise of a man who had never once doubted himself. At 36, Arnold had become a legend, the self-made billionaire who turned a dusty garage startup into a global energy empire worth $42 billion. His name sat on magazine covers beside words like visionary, revolutionary, and untouchable. And today's signing, this merger with Blackwood Global Holdings, would seal his place in history. Inside the room, success hung thick in the air. 12 lawyers in charcoal suits lined the left side of the table, briefcases open, tablets glowing. 5 board members sat across from them, their cufflinks gleaming like small declarations of victory. At the far end, 3 Blackwood executives, men who had flown across continents just to witness the signing, waited with polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. The scene was almost cinematic. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling glass, spreading golden patterns across the Italian marble floor. The panoramic view of the city stretched endlessly, towers of ambition, glittering glass, and the constant hum of progress below. In the center of it all sat a single table of dark mahogany, polished to a mirror finish. On it, a stack of paper waited, 72 pages of legal perfection, the contract that would change everything. Arnold moved with controlled precision. His suit, hand-stitched midnight blue, caught the light just enough to remind everyone that power had a look. His platinum cufflinks, engraved with his late father's initials, shimmered as he adjusted them. He smiled faintly, that quiet, confident smile people had come to recognize. The smile that said, "I've won again." He leaned forward and spoke. His voice, low and steady, filled the room. "Gentlemen," he began, "today we make history." It was a declaration, not an invitation. The kind of sentence that made cameras ready their focus and investors exhale. But history, real history, rarely follows the script. Because what Arnold Pierce didn't know was that the next chapter of his empire wouldn't be written by the 12 lawyers, or the 5 board members, or the 3 visiting billionaires. It would be written by the quiet boy in the corner, the one nobody thought mattered. Michael. He was 10 years old, small for his age, but sharp-eyed and watchful. His dark brown skin glowed softly under the filtered sunlight. His hair, short and neatly trimmed, curled slightly at the edges. He wore a bright blue polo shirt, one size too large, and dark trousers that brushed against shoes that had clearly been polished that morning by loving hands. He had been told to stay silent, to wait quietly while his aunt, Mrs. Grace the maid, finished her duties. She had brought him along because school was closed that day. She'd given him a coloring book and a firm warning: sit still. Don't make a sound. Don't draw attention. But Michael wasn't just the maid's nephew. He was the son of her late elder sister, Angela, a woman whose name had once meant something to Arnold Pierce. A woman who had loved him, and whose memory still lingered somewhere in the parts of his heart he kept locked away. It was a truth buried under years of silence, one Grace had carried like a hidden scar. Michael sat quietly, half hidden behind a leather chair, pretending to doodle while his bright eyes darted across the room, curious about everything. He watched the way the men talked, the way the lawyers flipped pages, the way the air seemed to hum with money and pressure. He didn't understand all of it, but he understood enough. When Arnold opened the contract, Michael's gaze drifted to the document. The boy had a habit, one Grace never quite understood, of remembering things in impossible detail. Words, numbers, patterns. His mind worked like a camera, storing every page he'd ever glanced at. And he had seen these papers before. 3 weeks earlier, while waiting in Arnold's office after hours, he had noticed a folder on the floor, one that had slipped behind the bookshelf. Out of curiosity, he had picked it up. Inside were pages filled with legal language he couldn't fully read, but something about them had fascinated him. He had stared at them for a few minutes, long enough for every word, every number, every signature line to imprint itself in his mind. Now, as he watched Arnold raise the pen, a gleaming silver Montblanc worth more than his aunt's yearly salary, Michael's pulse quickened. Because some of those numbers looked wrong. He couldn't explain how he knew, only that the same sequence, the same reference codes, appeared in this document, but not in the same places. They had been shifted, rearranged, as if hiding something behind the words. His aunt's warning echoed in his head, "Be quiet, Michael. Don't say a word." But something inside him, something instinctive and brave, refused to stay silent. He stood up. His small hands trembled, but his voice, though soft, was steady. "Sir, that paper is wrong." Every head turned. The sound that followed wasn't silence, it was disbelief. The kind of silence that hums with tension, where even the air feels afraid to move. One of the lawyers chuckled, a dry sound meant to dismiss him. Another whispered, "Who let the kid in here?" Arnold looked up from the contract, brows tightening. His pen froze mid-air. The boy's eyes met his wide, earnest, unblinking. There was no defiance there, only truth. And for reasons he couldn't explain, Arnold felt something stir in his chest. A strange flicker of recognition, like déjà vu in human form. He set the pen down slowly. "What did you say?" Michael swallowed hard. "That paper, it's wrong." Laughter rippled softly around the table, nervous, forced. But Arnold didn't laugh. The more he looked at the boy, the more the weight in his chest grew heavier. He gestured for security to hold back, then motioned for the boy to come closer. Michael hesitated, then stepped into the sunlight, the blue of his shirt glowing against the sterile glass and marble around them. In that instant, every person in the room could see what Arnold saw, something extraordinary in the child's eyes. What no one yet knew was that this moment, this single interruption, would unravel a billion-dollar conspiracy, expose a betrayal buried deep within the company, and reconnect a father with a son he never knew he had. But for now, there was only the echo of that small, trembling voice, and the billionaire who lowered his pen, realizing that history had just been rewritten. The billionaire's pen hovered just inches above the signature line, but it no longer felt like a tool of triumph. It felt like a weapon aimed at his own empire. Arnold Pierce leaned back slowly, his expression unreadable. Around him, murmurs swelled like low thunder, the shuffle of papers, the uneasy shifting of expensive suits. But his gaze never left the boy. "What did you mean, son?" His tone was calm, but beneath it ran a quiet tension, the kind that makes grown men forget how to breathe. Michael's small hands fidgeted at his sides. "It's not the same paper, sir, it's different. The numbers are wrong." The laughter that followed was softer this time, uncertain, forced. One of the Blackwood representatives, a man with silver hair and a smile polished by politics, leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Pierce," he said lightly, "children have wonderful imaginations. Let's not waste time." But Arnold didn't move. His instincts, the same instincts that had turned a garage idea into a global empire, whispered that something wasn't right. He had made a career out of trusting logic, but right now, something deeper was speaking, intuition. "Let him speak," Arnold said quietly. The room fell still again. Even the city noise from below seemed to vanish behind the thick glass walls. Michael took a hesitant step forward, his shoes barely making a sound on the polished marble floor. His eyes, large, dark, and full of an almost uncomfortable intelligence, fixed on the document. "Page 43, he murmured. "There's a number there that doesn't belong. 14, subsection C. It links to another paper. One that says something about buying everything back." The words tumbled out in a rush, unpolished but precise, the way truth often is when it comes from a child. Arnold frowned. "A buyback clause?" He turned toward his chief counsel. "Is there anything like that in this contract?" The lead attorney, Martin Graves, blinked rapidly, his face losing a shade of color. "No, sir. Absolutely not. That section merely references intellectual property protections." "Then check it," Arnold interrupted. His voice carried the authority of command, crisp, final, and absolute. Now. The flurry that followed was controlled chaos. Lawyers leaned over pages, whispered furiously, typed into laptops. The hum of power shifted, from celebration to suspicion. Michael stood motionless, small and out of place, the only calm presence in the room. Arnold watched him in silence. The posture, the composure, the unflinching focus. Something about the boy tugged at memory, at familiarity, like a face glimpsed in an old dream. Minutes ticked by before Martin Graves looked up. His voice was thin, dry. "Sir, there's something here." The words hung heavy. Arnold approached the table, his shadow cutting across the golden light. "Explain." Martin swallowed. "There's a reference chain embedded in the legal citations. It shouldn't exist, not in this format. It links to a secondary document not included in the main disclosure." "In English, Martin." "It means, sir," Martin said, his voice trembling, "if you had signed this, you'd be giving up your company within 3 years. Blackwood Global would own a controlling stake through a hidden buyback clause." The silence that followed was absolute. Arnold's stepbrother, Victor Pierce, sat at the far end of the table, his face pale, his jaw tight. He had insisted on being there for family unity, but now his fingers drummed the table in a rhythm too deliberate to be nervous. Arnold's eyes locked on him. "Did you know about this?" Victor's smirk was faint, defensive. "Of course not. Why would I sabotage my own brother?" But Arnold knew that tone. He'd heard it years ago, in boardroom battles, in inheritance disputes, in the quiet lies of family dinners. Because no one lies smoother than blood. He turned to Michael again. "How did you notice this?" Michael hesitated. "I saw papers like it before, in your office. They fell behind the shelf when my aunt was cleaning. The numbers looked the same." Arnold blinked. "You remembered numbers? Exact references?" Michael nodded. "All of them." The boy's voice was matter-of-fact, not boastful. As if remembering entire documents was as ordinary as tying his shoes. One of the board members whispered, "He's bluffing. He's just a kid." Arnold ignored them. He leaned down until he was eye level with Michael. "What's your name, son?" "Michael," he said softly. "Michael what?" "Michael Harris." He hesitated before adding, "My mom was Angela. She's gone now." Something in the name hit Arnold like a wave of cold air. Angela. The name he hadn't spoken aloud in almost 11 years. He straightened slowly, but his expression betrayed nothing. "Martin," he said, voice clipped, "lock the contract. No one leaves this room until every page is verified." "Yes, sir." The men from Blackwood exchanged nervous glances. One began typing on his phone until Arnold's head of security stepped forward. "No devices, gentlemen." The room became a hive of movement, screens lighting up, pages rustling, tension thick enough to taste. Through it all, Michael stood quietly near the chair where he'd been sitting before this storm began. His small hands clasped together, knuckles white, eyes fixed on Arnold. He wasn't afraid. Just waiting. 30 minutes later, the truth was undeniable. Buried deep within the contract's digital code were reference lines, invisible to the naked eye, leading to an amendment labeled Pierce Acquisition 3-Year Protocol. A clause that would have transferred full operational control of Pierce Industries to an offshore holding managed by Victor Pierce and Blackwood Global Holdings. A betrayal worth billions. Arnold exhaled slowly, the fury in his veins replaced by cold clarity. He turned to his stepbrother, whose face now glistened with sweat. "You planted this." Victor's composure cracked. "You can't prove that." "Oh, I will," Arnold said. His voice was low, steady, deadly. "And when I do, you'll wish you had never touched my company." He gestured toward the guards. "Escort Mr. Pierce and our Blackwood guests out of the building. Effective immediately." As the room erupted in motion, guards moving, lawyers whispering, chaos blooming, Arnold turned back to Michael. The boy was staring at the city skyline through the glass wall, sunlight reflecting off his eyes. Arnold approached quietly. "You just saved me from losing everything," he said. "How did you know what to look for?" Michael shrugged. "I just remember things. Sometimes they come back when I see them again. Like puzzles that fit together." Arnold studied him, really studied him this time. The shape of his eyes, the way he tilted his head when thinking, the quiet confidence that didn't match his age. For a moment, something strange and heavy stirred in his chest. "Michael," he said softly, "who's your father?" The boy's expression changed. His voice dropped to a whisper. I don't know, sir. My aunt says he was someone important. But she never told me his name. Arnold's throat tightened. He didn't understand why. Not yet. But something deep inside him already knew. Arnold didn't speak for a long moment. He stood beside the conference table, the morning light tracing sharp lines across his face. Inside, rage and disbelief wrestled for control. Betrayal had a taste, metallic, heavy, almost like blood, and he could feel it at the back of his throat. He had trusted his stepbrother once. Trusted him with access, with power, with family. But betrayal, he was learning, doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the ones who know where your heart is buried. Martin, he said at last, voice controlled but lethal, trace the origin of that amendment. Every version, every signature, every server it passed through. I want names. The lead attorney nodded, already typing. Arnold's attention shifted back to the boy. Michael stood perfectly still, hands clasped, expression unreadable. Something about his calm unnerved everyone in the room. He didn't look scared. He looked certain. You have an exceptional eye, Arnold said quietly. Most grown men in this room didn't notice what you just did. Michael blinked. I just remembered it. I saw those numbers before. They didn't match. A soft gasp came from one of the assistants. He remembered them? Arnold frowned slightly. How many digits are we talking about? Michael hesitated. All of them. The words hung there like a miracle. Arnold crouched to his level, lowering his voice. Do you know what you just saved me from? Michael shook his head. No, sir. $42 billion, Arnold said softly. And everything my father built. For the first time, a small smile flickered across Michael's lips, uncertain but proud. Then his gaze drifted toward the door where his aunt, Mrs. Grace, had appeared, her face pale with panic. Michael, she whispered harshly. What did you do? Before she could drag him out, Arnold raised a hand. Let him stay. Grace froze. Mr. Pierce, I'm so sorry. He didn't mean to. I said let him stay. Something in his tone made everyone fall silent again. Moments later, the IT team entered, carrying devices, hard drives, digital records. The room transformed into a battlefield of quiet urgency. Lawyers muttered. Technicians scrolled through code. And at the far end, Victor Pierce watched it all unravel. Arnold turned to him. You had access to these drafts, didn't you? Victor shrugged, a smirk playing on his lips. You're paranoid, Arnold. Not everyone wants your throne. Maybe not, Arnold replied. But you've always wanted my fall. Careful, little brother, Victor said smoothly. Allegations without proof can get expensive. Arnold's jaw tightened. Proof is coming. Within minutes, the head of digital forensics spoke up. Mr. Pierce, we found something. Arnold moved closer. Show me. On the screen appeared a series of metadata logs, timestamps, IP addresses, user entries. One of them stood out, VP, Admin 01, modified the document exactly 6 days earlier from a private server registered under Victor Pierce's personal holding company. The room collectively exhaled. Arnold stared at the evidence, then at his stepbrother. That's your login. Victor's smirk faltered. It's a setup. You think I'd be stupid enough to leave a trace? No, Arnold said evenly. I think you're arrogant enough to believe I'd never look. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Victor could hear. You were going to sign my name to my own downfall. Tell me, how long have you been planning this? Victor's silence was answer enough. Arnold straightened. Get him out of my building. Security advanced. Victor rose slowly, fury darkening his eyes. You think this is over? He hissed. You think a child and a miracle memory can protect you? You don't even know what you've built, Arnold. You never did. He was escorted out before anyone could respond. The heavy doors closed with a thud that echoed through the room like a full stop. Arnold turned toward Grace and Michael. The maid was trembling, still holding her apron with shaking hands. Sir, please, she stammered. Don't punish him. He didn't mean. Punish him. Arnold interrupted softly. Mrs. Grace, your nephew just saved my life's work. She blinked in disbelief. He what? He saw what no one else could, Arnold said, his voice quieter now, heavy with something unspoken. He stopped me from signing away everything. That takes courage. Or maybe fate. Grace looked down at Michael, her expression a mix of fear and pride. You shouldn't have spoken, Michael, she whispered. But thank you. Arnold watched the two of them. Grace's face looked older than he remembered, though he wasn't sure why that thought crossed his mind. Something about her eyes, the way they shimmered with unshed grief, pulled him back years, back to another face, another woman with the same quiet fire. Angela. He hadn't said her name in years, but now it echoed in his mind like a ghost returning home. Angela Harris. The woman he had loved before ambition swallowed his heart. The woman who had disappeared without explanation one spring morning, leaving behind a silence that had haunted him for over a decade. He looked again at Michael. The shape of the boy's chin. The curve of his jaw. The eyes, Angela's eyes. It hit him like a slow, cold wave. Arnold forced his voice steady. Grace, your sister. Her name was Angela, wasn't it? Grace stiffened, eyes darting nervously. Yes, sir. She passed years ago. How old was Michael when she died? 3. Arnold's breath caught. And his father? Grace hesitated. She never said. Only that he was someone she once cared for. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air thicker. Arnold couldn't look away from the boy. He saw echoes of a past he thought buried, memories of laughter, of plans, of a love he'd chosen to forget for the sake of empire. He turned toward the window, gathering himself. Mrs. Grace, take Michael home. He's had a long day. Grace nodded quickly, relief washing over her face. She placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, but before they reached the door, Arnold spoke again. Michael. The boy turned. Yes, sir. Arnold's gaze softened. You have a gift. Never hide it again. Michael nodded slowly. Thank you, sir. And then he was gone. When the doors closed, Arnold stood alone in the sunlit silence, surrounded by scattered contracts and abandoned pens. The city glimmered beyond the glass, indifferent and magnificent. But somewhere inside him, the world had shifted. For the first time in years, the billionaire who had everything realized what he might have lost, and what he had just found. For hours after the conference room had emptied, Arnold Pierce remained standing by the window, motionless, unreadable. The skyline of the city shimmered in the distance, towers glinting like promises. But for once, he wasn't thinking about profits or mergers. He was thinking about a pair of dark eyes, a boy's eyes, that had seen through the deception of men twice his age. The building's lights dimmed as the evening staff began to leave. The air felt strangely heavy. Arnold's reflection in the glass looked older, almost hollow. The world saw a billionaire at the height of his power. But he saw something else, a man who had almost signed away his soul. He turned and looked at the contract again, now sealed in a clear evidence folder on the table. His lawyers had taken copies, his investigators were working overnight, and his stepbrother Victor was already facing legal consequences. The empire had been saved. Yet, something in him was unsettled. He picked up a photo frame from his desk, an old black-and-white picture of his father, Harold Pierce, shaking hands with an oil executive. The caption below read, "Integrity builds legacy." Arnold smiled bitterly. "You'd be proud, wouldn't you?" he muttered. "Your son almost sold integrity for legacy." He set the frame down and loosened his tie. His mind returned to the boy, Michael, and the maid, Grace. The way she'd looked at him when he'd said Angela's name. That flicker of fear. That hesitation. He poured himself a glass of water and sat down, opening a digital file on his laptop. He typed the name Angela Harris into the company's HR archive search. No results. He tried again, this time broadening the database. Nothing. Then he remembered, Angela had never been an employee. She'd been a contract designer, working on early-stage branding for his first startup, years before Pierce Industries became what it was. He switched to the archives of the old company, SolarCore Labs. The system lagged for a moment before populating a list of names. And there she was. Angela Harris, design consultant, 2010 to 2012. Arnold clicked on her profile. A small picture appeared, grainy, faded, but unmistakable. The same soft eyes. The same smile that had once made him forget work for entire afternoons. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. The memories came uninvited, the rooftop coffee breaks, the laughter in cluttered studios, the night she told him she couldn't stay. He'd chosen expansion over affection, ambition over love. She'd left quietly, never asking for anything. And 3 years later, she was gone. Arnold's hand trembled slightly as he minimized the window. He didn't want to see the picture anymore. Because he already knew. Michael wasn't just her nephew. He was her son. And if Angela had truly kept his identity secret, there was only one possible reason. She hadn't wanted Arnold's world to touch hers. He pressed a button on his intercom. "Lena," he said to his secretary. "Get me everything you can on Grace Harris. Employment history, next of kin, residential address, and her sister Angela." "Yes, sir," came the reply. As the call ended, Arnold sank back in his chair. The office was silent except for the soft hum of the city below. He closed his eyes. He could still remember Angela's last words. "You're building something incredible, Arnold. But I don't want to be the shadow that follows it." He'd thought she meant she didn't want to hold him back. Now he wondered if she'd meant something else entirely, that she didn't want him to destroy what she carried. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Lena stepped in, holding a small tablet. "Sir, I found Mrs. Grace's address. She lives in Westbridge, near the old textile district." Arnold nodded. "Thank you." Lena hesitated. "Do you want me to contact her?" "No," he said, standing. "I'll go myself." She looked startled. "Sir, at this hour?" "I don't care what hour it is." The streets of Westbridge looked nothing like the polished avenues Arnold was used to. The roads were cracked, the streetlights flickered, and the scent of rain and rust hung in the air. His black car stopped in front of a narrow building painted in faded blue. He stepped out, his tailored shoes clicking against the uneven pavement. A woman watering plants in the next doorway glanced at him, curiosity flashing in her eyes. Billionaires didn't visit this side of the city. He knocked gently on the door. It opened after a moment. Grace stood there, her apron still on, her expression startled and wary. "Mr. Pierce." "I'm sorry to come unannounced," he said softly. "May I come in?" Grace hesitated, then nodded. "Of course, sir." Inside, the small apartment was warm, cluttered, alive. A faint scent of lavender and soap filled the air. Children's books lay on a small table, beside a bowl of fruit. The place spoke of struggle, but also of care. Michael sat on a couch, reading a science book by the dim lamplight. When he looked up and saw Arnold, his eyes widened in confusion. Arnold smiled gently. "Hey there, Michael." "Hi, sir," the boy said quietly, standing politely. "Are you okay?" Arnold nodded. "Thanks to you, yes." Grace motioned for him to sit. "Can I get you something? Tea?" "No, thank you." He sat down carefully, hands clasped. "Grace, I need to ask you something important. About Angela." Grace froze. Her fingers tightened around her apron. "Sir, please, she's been gone a long time. Why bring that up now?" "Because," Arnold said slowly, "I believe she left behind something, someone that connects to me." Grace looked down, silent. "Michael," Arnold said softly, his voice breaking just a little, "is he Angela's son?" Grace didn't answer at first. Her silence said enough. Tears shimmered in her eyes. "She never told you," she whispered finally. She wanted to protect him. She didn't want her death to become a story about power and pity. She wanted him to grow up normal. Arnold leaned forward, voice barely audible. "And his father?" Grace looked up, meeting his eyes. "You already know, sir." The words landed like a quiet explosion. Arnold exhaled shakily. The air between them thickened, years of buried truth surfacing at once. Michael stood by the window, watching them, not understanding the weight of what had just been said. Arnold turned to him, his throat tightening. "Michael, do you like puzzles?" The boy nodded cautiously. "Yes, sir." "Good," Arnold said softly. Because I think we've both been part of one for a very long time. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, faint but deep, like the sound of something awakening. Arnold Pierce had faced corporate wars, hostile takeovers, political storms. But nothing, not success, not betrayal, had ever shaken him like this simple truth. For the first time in his life, he wasn't a CEO protecting an empire. He was a man trying to understand his son. The drive back to the mansion was silent. Rain whispered against the car windows, soft but relentless, like a secret that refused to stay buried. Arnold Pierce stared at the blurred lights of the city, his mind a storm of questions and memories that wouldn't fit neatly into logic. He had spent his life mastering control, markets, negotiations, men, but nothing had prepared him for the chaos of truth. When the car pulled into his long gated driveway, he didn't go inside immediately. He stood under the eaves of the mansion, watching the rain soak the marble steps. For the first time in years, the house felt too large, too empty. Angela's laughter used to echo in his mind like a song from another life. Tonight it returned, not as nostalgia, but as guilt. The next morning, Arnold arrived at headquarters before dawn. His assistant found him already reviewing security footage and legal files, but his focus was elsewhere. Grace's words from the night before kept repeating, "She never told you." She wanted to protect him. He pressed his hands against the desk and exhaled slowly. Protect him from what? From whom? From me? He called his head of security, Daniel Moore, into the office. Run a full background on Michael Harris, Arnold said. Education, medical, everything you can find. Discreetly. Daniel nodded. Understood, sir. Arnold hesitated. And include a DNA test kit. Daniel raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. I'll handle it personally. That evening, the results of Victor's scheme had already exploded across media networks. Corporate betrayal exposed. Stepbrother caught in $40 billion fraud attempt. Arnold's PR team begged him for statements, but he refused to face the cameras. He wasn't ready to play the role of the wounded hero. Because deep down, he wasn't angry about the betrayal anymore. He was angry at himself for missing what truly mattered all these years. He sat in the quiet of his study, staring at a framed architectural drawing Angela had once sketched. She'd titled it "Home Doesn't Have Walls." At the time, he thought it was metaphorical. Now, he realized it was prophetic. 2 days later, Daniel returned with a folder and a sealed envelope. "Sir," he said quietly, "the results are conclusive." Arnold's pulse quickened. He dismissed everyone else from the office and opened the envelope with trembling hands. The paper inside was simple, clinical, black text on white. Paternity probability, 99.98%. He read it again. And again. Michael wasn't just a reminder of the past. He was the past, living, breathing, standing right in front of him 2 days ago in a too big blue shirt, saving him from his own bloodline's deceit. Arnold pressed his fingers against his temples. Emotion and reason collided. How could he have not seen it? The shape of Michael's smile, the sharpness in his gaze, even the way he paused before speaking, all fragments of a woman he once loved. The empire he'd built suddenly felt smaller than one boy's truth. That evening, Arnold returned to Westbridge. The rain had stopped, replaced by a quiet golden sunset that bathed the old buildings in light. Grace answered the door, surprise flickering across her face. "Mr. Pierce," she said, wiping her hands on a towel. "You're back." "Yes," he said softly. "Is Michael home?" "He's doing his homework. Come in." The boy sat at the small dining table, papers spread in front of him, his pencil moving fast. When he looked up and saw Arnold, his eyes lit up with cautious curiosity. Arnold sat down opposite him. "Michael, I wanted to thank you again, for what you did. You saved something very important to me." Michael shrugged shyly. "It was nothing, sir. I just said what I saw." "No," Arnold said, smiling faintly, "you saw what no one else could." He paused, his voice growing quieter. "Michael, may I ask you something personal?" The boy nodded. "Do you ever wonder about your father?" Michael hesitated. "Sometimes. Aunt Grace says he was kind. That's all she tells me." Arnold looked into the boy's eyes and saw Angela's reflection there. He swallowed hard. Would you like to know who he was? Michael frowned. Do you know him? Arnold took a slow breath. I do. His voice trembled slightly. Because it was me. Grace gasped softly behind him, but Arnold didn't turn. He kept his gaze steady on Michael, who sat frozen, wide-eyed. I didn't know, Arnold said. I swear to you, I didn't know you existed. If I had, things would have been different. I would have been there. The boy said nothing. His small hands gripped the edge of the table. Grace stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. After what felt like a lifetime, Michael spoke in a whisper. You're my dad. Arnold nodded slowly. Yes, son. I am. The room was so quiet that the ticking of a wall clock sounded like thunder. Michael blinked fast, his voice trembling. Why didn't you come for us? Arnold's throat tightened. Because I didn't know. And by the time I found out about your mother, it was too late. Tears shimmered in Grace's eyes. Angela didn't want you to feel trapped, she said softly. She wanted to raise him free of your world, the boardrooms, the cameras, the expectations. Arnold nodded. She was right. I would have ruined that. He leaned closer to Michael. But I can't change what's gone. I can only promise you one thing, I'll never walk away again. Michael looked up at him for a long time. Then slowly, he nodded. Okay. Arnold blinked back tears he hadn't felt in years. Okay. The boy gave a small, tired smile. Okay, Dad. For the first time in decades, Arnold Pierce felt something greater than victory. It wasn't power. It wasn't wealth. It was peace, the kind he hadn't known since Angela's laughter last filled a room. That night, as he walked back to his car, Grace watched him through the window. The billionaire who once ruled the skyline now carried himself like a man humbled by love. When he reached the car door, he paused and looked up at the night sky, whispering to the woman who had once changed his life and through her son, had just saved it again. Thank you, Angela, he said. You gave me everything I didn't know I needed. And somewhere deep inside, he could almost hear her voice, soft, familiar, full of warmth. Now you finally understand, Arnold. Legacy isn't what you build. It's who you leave behind. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the tall windows of Pierce Manor, gilding the marble floors in quiet gold. For once, the house wasn't silent. From the study came the faint sound of laughter, young, unpolished, real. Michael sat on the edge of a massive leather chair, a tablet balanced on his knees. Arnold leaned over him, watching as the boy navigated through the blueprints of a solar plant. So this, Arnold said, pointing to a diagram, is how energy flows from each panel into the grid. What do you think? Michael squinted, tapping the screen. You could reroute it here, he said, tracing a line between two junctions, and cut the energy loss by 5%? Arnold blinked, genuinely surprised. That's exactly right. Michael grinned. I like puzzles. Arnold chuckled quietly, though his voice carried a softness he rarely allowed. So did your mother. The words hung in the air for a moment. Grace, standing by the doorway, smiled faintly, eyes glistening. For weeks, she'd watched the impossible unfold, a billionaire learning to be a father, a boy finding a place in a world he never belonged to. Later that afternoon, Arnold and Michael walked through the gardens. The air was crisp, alive with the scent of rain-soaked roses. Arnold carried 2 cups of cocoa, one steaming, one barely half full because Michael had insisted on extra marshmallows. You know, Arnold said, when I was your age, I didn't even know what solar panels were. Michael giggled. Because they didn't exist? Exactly. Arnold smiled. Back then, all I knew was how to take things apart. Radios, clocks, toys. My father hated it. But my mother used to say, you can't build something better until you understand how it breaks. Michael looked thoughtful. So, that's why you build energy stuff now? To fix what's broken. Arnold stopped walking. The question was so innocent, yet it cut deep. Yes, he said quietly. That's exactly why. They sat on a bench overlooking the lake. In the stillness, Arnold glanced sideways at his son. There was something healing about the boy's presence. The way he didn't try to fill the silence, the way he looked at the world with curiosity instead of judgment. He wanted to tell him everything, About Angela, about the company, about the mistakes he'd made chasing power instead of peace. But he didn't know where to begin. Michael looked up suddenly. Dad. Arnold's chest tightened at the word. It still felt new. Fragile. Sacred. Yes, son. Are you happy? Arnold paused. It was such a simple question, one the world's richest man couldn't answer easily. I think, he said slowly, I'm learning how to be. Michael smiled. That's good. Mom always said happiness isn't something you have. It's something you learn. Arnold felt his throat tighten again. She said that. Michael nodded. She said people who forget how to feel forget how to live. Arnold looked out over the water, his reflection shimmering beside his son's. Then I guess your mom was wiser than anyone I've ever met. As days passed, their bond grew naturally. Arnold brought Michael to the company on weekends, showing him how decisions shaped lives, not just profits. The boy's curiosity fascinated employees. They whispered that the child who had once stopped a $40 billion fraud was now shadowing the man he saved. In the boardroom, Michael asked questions most adults were too afraid to. Why do we build new things if old ones still work? Why do we call it progress if it hurts people? Arnold never had answers ready. But he loved that. For the first time, someone made him think, not like a CEO, but like a human being. He started noticing things he hadn't in years. The way his staff looked tired, the way the janitors went unnoticed, the way everyone bowed when he passed but never smiled. So he changed that. Within a month, Pierce Industries began reforming its policies, shorter work hours, scholarship programs for employees' children, and the creation of the Angela Harris Foundation for Youth Innovation, dedicated to teaching science and ethics in public schools. When the board questioned the decision, Arnold's answer was simple. Empires don't last because of money. They last because of meaning. But not everyone was ready to accept the new reality. The media, hungry for scandal, caught wind of Michael's true identity. Headlines screamed across networks, "The Billionaire's Secret Son." From maid's nephew to heir of a fortune. Reporters camped outside the mansion. Paparazzi followed Grace to the grocery store. Online, people speculated, doubted, twisted the truth. Arnold tried to shield them, but in the digital age, walls meant little. One evening, as Michael sat quietly reading, he asked, "Dad, are people mad because of me?" Arnold knelt beside him. "No, son. They're not mad at you. They're mad at the world for not being as simple as they wish it was." Michael frowned. "Mom said truth makes people uncomfortable." "She was right," Arnold said, smiling sadly. "But she also said truth always wins in the end." He brushed the boy's hair gently, his voice low. "And I'll protect that truth with everything I have." That night, as the house fell silent, Arnold walked to his study. He poured himself a glass of water, not whiskey. For once, his mind didn't need dulling. He opened the curtains and looked out over the city. The skyline shimmered, reflecting the empire he'd built, and the one he was now rebuilding, one piece of heart at a time. Behind him, a soft voice said, "Dad." He turned. Michael stood in the doorway, clutching a small folded paper. "What's that?" Arnold asked. Michael walked over and handed it to him. "It's something I drew. For you." Arnold unfolded the paper. It was a rough sketch, childish lines forming a simple scene, two figures standing side by side, one tall, one small, beneath the title Pierce and Son Energy. Arnold smiled through the tears forming in his eyes. "You think we'd make a good team?" Michael grinned. "We already do." Arnold pulled him close. "You're right, son. We do." And as the night settled over the city, the man who once believed legacy was measured in billions finally understood what true wealth felt like. The warmth of a child's arms around his neck, the peace of knowing love had returned home. It began quietly, like most storms do. A single whisper in a boardroom. A leaked file. A headline that shouldn't exist. 3 months had passed since Arnold publicly introduced Michael as his son. The world had slowly begun to accept the story, a billionaire, once broken by greed, redeemed through the discovery of his child. The narrative was powerful, inspiring, too perfect. And perfection, to men like Victor Pierce, was intolerable. Arnold first noticed the shift one Thursday morning. His chief of communications entered his office pale-faced, holding a tablet. "Sir," she said, voice trembling, "you should see this." On the screen flashed a breaking news banner. Anonymous source leaks evidence suggesting Pierce Industries laundered funds through child's charity. Arnold's chest went still. "That's impossible." The woman hesitated. "The documents look authentic. Bank transfers, offshore accounts, everything points to the Angela Harris Foundation." For a moment, Arnold said nothing. Then with an eerie calm he asked, "Who sent it?" "No name. The leak came from a private network routed through multiple countries." He didn't need a name. He already knew who. Victor. The brother who once smiled beside him at family dinners, who toasted to his success, who plotted his downfall. Arnold stood. "Call legal. Finance. PR. I want full internal verification. No press statements until I say so." Within hours, chaos rippled through the company. Shareholders panicked. Stocks dipped. Reporters swarmed the gates again, cameras flashing like storms. But the worst moment came when Michael, scrolling through the TV channels at home, saw his own picture beside the word fraud. He turned to Grace, confused. "Auntie, what's happening?" Grace's voice faltered. "It's nothing, sweetheart. People lie when they're jealous." But Michael had seen enough of the adult world to know when something was wrong. That evening, when Arnold returned home, the boy was waiting by the door. "Dad," he said, voice small but steady, "they're saying our foundation steals money. Did I do something wrong?" Arnold froze. The weight of those words hit harder than any headline. He knelt down, taking the boy's hands. "No, son. You didn't do anything wrong. The truth just takes time to fight back." Michael frowned. "Like before? When I stopped the bad paper?" Arnold smiled faintly. "Exactly like that." By midnight, the crisis team filled Arnold's office. The evidence against him was damning: hundreds of fabricated transactions, forged signatures, falsified approvals. Every detail carefully engineered to look real. One of his senior accountants looked up nervously. "Sir, whoever did this had deep access. These weren't random files. They were reconstructed using internal templates. Someone knew exactly how your systems operate." Arnold's gaze hardened. "Victor." Martin Graves, his attorney, looked uneasy. "If it's him, he's gotten smarter. This isn't about money, it's about destroying your reputation." Arnold rubbed his temple. "And he's using my son's name to do it." 2 days later, Victor made his move. He appeared on live television, seated comfortably in an expensive studio, every inch the image of sincerity. "I loved my brother," he told the interviewer, eyes glassy with crocodile grief. "But the truth must come out. The foundation he created, using that poor boy as a front, is nothing but a smokescreen for offshore laundering." The host leaned forward. "You're saying your brother exploited his own child for money?" Victor nodded solemnly. "I wish it weren't true." The clip went viral within minutes. When Arnold saw it, he didn't shout. He didn't throw anything. He just closed his laptop and whispered, "So this is how far he'll go." Grace sat across from him, shaking her head. "That man has no soul." "He never did," Arnold murmured. But then Michael's small voice cut through the silence. "Can't we show people the truth? You always say truth wins, right?" Arnold looked at him, and realized the boy was right. For years, he had hidden behind lawyers and media handlers. This time, the battle needed something different. Something honest. "Son," Arnold said slowly, "how do you feel about telling our story your way?" Michael tilted his head. "Like, on camera?" Arnold smiled. "Exactly." The next evening, instead of denying the accusations through press releases, Arnold and Michael sat together in front of a single camera. No scripts, no spin doctors. Just truth. Arnold spoke first. "A few months ago, a 10-year-old boy saved me from losing everything. That boy is my son. He taught me that honesty doesn't fear exposure, it invites it." He paused, looking into the lens. "Every document in our foundation is open for audit. Every number. Every donor. Because what we build together, Michael and I, isn't about money. It's about giving back what the world forgets to offer: hope. He placed a gentle hand on Michael's shoulder. The boy looked straight into the camera. My mom used to say truth is like light, it always finds a way out. That's what we're doing. The clip spread faster than Victor's lies ever could. People shared it not because it was polished, but because it was real. Within 48 hours, independent auditors released their findings. No evidence of fraud, no missing funds, no offshore accounts. The entire scandal unraveled. Victor's fabricated network of shell companies traced directly back to him. He was arrested on charges of corporate sabotage, conspiracy, and digital fraud. As he was escorted into a police car, he looked up at the cameras and spat, "He took everything from me. Everything." Arnold watched the footage in silence. There was no triumph in his eyes, only sorrow. "No, Victor," he murmured. "You took it from yourself." That night, father and son sat together on the mansion balcony, watching the city lights flicker like scattered stars. Michael leaned his head against his father's arm. "It's over, right?" Arnold nodded. "It's over." "Will Uncle Victor be okay?" Arnold hesitated. "I don't know. But I hope someday he finds peace. Hate is a heavy thing to carry." Michael looked thoughtful. "Then maybe we should forgive him." Arnold smiled softly. "You sound just like your mother." "I think she'd forgive him too," Michael said simply. Arnold looked out into the skyline, the empire, the noise, the wealth, and realized that the truest strength he'd ever found wasn't in building power, but in raising forgiveness. He turned to his son. "You know, Michael, I used to think my greatest success was this company." Michael blinked up at him. "And now?" Arnold smiled. "Now I know my greatest success is you." The storm had finally passed. The city no longer whispered about scandal or betrayal, it now spoke of redemption. For the first time in months, Pierce Industries was quiet. The cameras were gone, the reporters had retreated, and the world had moved on. But for Arnold Pierce, peace didn't come from silence. It came from the truth, the one story he had yet to tell. It was a Sunday morning when he decided it was time. The sun painted warm light through the glass walls of the mansion. Grace had made breakfast, and the air smelled of pancakes and maple syrup. Michael sat at the table, flipping through a book about space exploration, his curls catching the sunlight. Arnold watched him for a long moment. There was so much of her in him, the curiosity, the quiet fire, the way he thought before he spoke. Every time he saw his son smile, it was like watching a memory of Angela Harris come back to life. He cleared his throat softly. "Michael, can we talk?" The boy looked up immediately, sensing something serious. "Sure, Dad." Arnold sat across from him, folding his hands together. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of years. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you. About your mother. About what really happened." Michael's expression changed, a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "You mean, how she died?" Arnold nodded slowly. "Yes. And how we met." He took a deep breath, letting the past unfold like a film behind his eyes. "Your mom and I met a long time ago," he began. "Before I had money. Before the suits and the boardrooms. Back then, I was just a young engineer with a wild dream, building clean energy solutions in an old garage. She was a freelance designer, hired to help me create the first logo for my company." A small smile tugged at his lips. "She hated my ideas. Said they looked like they were made by a man who thought too much and felt too little." Michael grinned faintly. "That sounds like her." Arnold nodded. "She was brave. Sharp. And she saw through me like glass. While everyone else told me what I wanted to hear, she told me what I needed to hear. That's what made me fall in love with her." He paused. The words grew heavier now. "But as my company grew, I got busier. I stopped listening. I started chasing deals, investors, power, and somewhere along the way, I stopped chasing her." Michael's small voice broke the silence. "You mean, you left her?" Arnold's eyes lowered. "In a way, yes. Not because I didn't love her, but because I thought love could wait. I told myself I'd come back when everything was perfect, when I had enough to give her the world." He swallowed hard. "But by the time I tried, she was gone." The boy frowned. "Gone where?" Arnold's voice softened. She got sick. It happened fast. Grace told me she didn't want me to know. She didn't want to distract me or become a story in the press. She wanted to protect the one thing she loved more than anything else in the world. Michael's lip quivered. Me. Arnold nodded, eyes glistening. Yes, son. You. For a moment, neither spoke. The air felt thick with grief and love interwoven, the kind that time couldn't erase. Arnold reached across the table and took his son's hand. I spent years believing I was building an empire for the future. But I wasn't. I was just trying to fill a space that only she could fill. When you stopped me from signing that contract, I didn't just see a boy. I saw her, saving me one more time. Michael wiped at his eyes. I wish I remembered her. Arnold smiled gently. You don't need to. You are her memory. Every time you ask the right question, every time you speak the truth, that's her living through you. The boy hesitated, then leaned forward and wrapped his small arms around his father. I'm glad you came back, Dad. Arnold closed his eyes, returning the embrace. I'm glad you found me, son. Later that day, they visited Angela's grave for the first time together. The sky was soft and gray, the kind of weather she used to say was perfect for honesty. Arnold placed a bouquet of white lilies on the headstone. Michael stood beside him quietly, clutching a folded piece of paper. What's that? Arnold asked. It's a letter, Michael said. I wrote it for Mom. He crouched and placed it gently by the flowers. The wind tugged at the edges, but the paper stayed still, as if the earth itself was listening. Arnold watched him, his heart full. Do you want to tell her something out loud? Michael nodded, voice barely above a whisper. Hi, Mom. It's me, Michael. I met Dad. He's not like people say. He's kind. And he's trying. You'd be proud of him. Arnold's vision blurred. He rested a hand on his son's shoulder, whispering, She already is. That night, as they drove home, the city lights shimmered like a river of gold beneath them. Dad. Michael said softly. Do you think she can see us? Arnold smiled, eyes still on the road. I don't think she ever stopped watching. Michael nodded, content. Then I'll make sure she keeps smiling. Arnold reached over and squeezed his hand. We both will. At home, Arnold returned to his study. On his desk sat the sketch Michael had given him, Pierce and Son Energy. He smiled and took a pen, adding 3 more words beneath it, founded on truth. He looked out over the city, the empire, the legacy, the endless lights, and realized that for all his billions, this was the first time his world truly made sense. Because the truth wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. The following spring, the world saw a new side of Arnold Pierce, not the ruthless mogul who once ruled the headlines, but a man reborn through truth, humility, and love. The grand atrium of Pierce Industries headquarters shimmered with light that morning. Dozens of journalists filled the space, their cameras pointed toward the sleek podium at the front. The air buzzed with curiosity. Everyone had come to hear the billionaire speak, the man whose fall and rise had captured the world's attention. Arnold stepped onto the stage wearing a simple charcoal suit. No entourage. No theatrics. Just him, and the boy who had changed everything, standing quietly by his side. Michael, dressed neatly in a navy blue blazer and that same bright blue polo beneath, gave the cameras a shy smile. He wasn't the hidden child anymore. He was the future. Arnold approached the microphone. His voice, calm and resonant, filled the hall. A year ago, I stood in a room just like this, ready to sign a contract that would have cost me everything. A single voice stopped me that day. It wasn't a lawyer, or an investor, or a politician. It was a child's voice, my son's voice, saying, Sir, that paper is wrong. The audience listened in silence. Every word felt like a confession, and a rebirth. Arnold continued, eyes glistening under the lights. That moment taught me something I'd forgotten. Truth doesn't need power to be heard. It just needs courage. He turned slightly toward Michael, who looked up at him with pride. For years, I believed legacy was measured in wealth, in buildings, in mergers, in numbers. But I was wrong. Legacy is measured in people. In hearts you touch. In truths you protect. In the courage you pass on to the next generation. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes. But for once, Arnold wasn't speaking for the media, he was speaking from his soul. Today, I'm proud to announce that the company you've known as Pierce Industries will take a new name, Pierce & Son Energy. It will stand for what my son reminded me of, that light means nothing unless it's shared. A ripple of applause filled the room, soft at first, then growing into a wave. Grace stood in the crowd, tears streaming down her cheeks, her hands clasped in quiet pride. Arnold turned to Michael. "Son," he whispered, "this is your world now. Promise me one thing, never let the truth go quiet." Michael nodded, his eyes bright. "I won't, Dad." Arnold smiled, and for a moment, the weight of decades lifted. The man who once built an empire from ambition now stood reborn, not as a titan of industry, but as a father who finally understood that love was the only empire that mattered. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, father and son stood on the mansion balcony. The city lights glowed below them, like the heartbeat of a living world. "Dad," Michael said softly, "what happens now?" Arnold looked out at the horizon, his tone calm, sure, almost peaceful. "Now," he said with a smile, "now we keep the light burning." The boy grinned. "Together." "Always," Arnold said. And as the camera pulled back, past the balcony, past the skyline, past the vast, living city, Arnold's voice returned one last time, calm and steady, the voice of a man who had found redemption. Some stories remind us that power can corrupt, money can vanish, and legacies can fade. But truth always finds its way home. And sometimes it finds it in the voice of a child brave enough to say, "Sir, that paper is wrong." If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that truth and love can change everything, don't leave without joining this community. Yellow Heart, subscribe to Majesty's Echo of Emotions for more, where every story shines a light on the power of kindness, courage, and redemption. Your one click helps us share more stories that heal, inspire, and remind the world what really matters.